Anything breaks down?
Oh, it didn't work right. The evaluation didn't work right.
Oh, on YouTube, you get it.
It split it.
Like split it?
Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube is always weird about it.
Oh, it's here. It's here.
It's there on Facebook. So there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Go ahead and save. You're doing what this would.
Okay, good morning to any attendees that are online. I think the weather has stopped folks from coming out in person today, but I don't have a lot of announcements. I just want to make sure to those of you that are attending online today that you please fill out the evaluation that is in the chat. The link to the evaluation is in the chat. That's really important to us that we get those back from you. And I also just wanted to mention to anyone attending online that the presenter Eva Slezak's slides will be available. And if you'd like a copy of those, you can email SSH, that's short for Social Science and History. So ssh@prattlibrary.org, and there will also, it'll also be on the last slide that she has, so you can see it there as well. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eva.
Good morning. It's a rainy day outside, but we've got lots to learn today. Today, I would like to share some information about finding information on your female ancestors. So we want to unravel some mysteries of the women relatives in your family tree. There is a lot to cover and a lot of interesting information to help you in your search. There is no one path to this. It all depends on information that you have, information that you'll find later. Trying to track down your female ancestors presents special research problems. Most American females change their last name to that of their husband, a practice that is still followed these days, but not by all. For much of American history, women have not had the same legal rights as men. The result is that women are generally listed less often than men, if they're even listed. And then even when they're listed, full information is not always given or complete or only initials. Consequently, the number of records mentioning women dwindles as the family history is researched into earlier and earlier time periods. There is a term that you run across called coverture. For much of American history, a woman's separate legal status ended upon her marriage. The husband essentially became a guardian and representative, and with few exceptions, had sole power to buy and sell property, vote, sue in a court of law, and make decisions for the family. A woman derived her citizenship from that of her husband. Now, there were exceptions, usually widows who had been left property by their deceased husbands, if the husband wrote a will stating that. Now, it indicated there was something in a legal case about persons incompetent to make will, that wills or testaments made or to be made of any lands, tenements, or hereditaments, or of any estate, pour outre vie, that's for another life, by any woman, covert or person, that's how they were designated, within the age of 21 years, or any idiot, lunatic, or person of non-sane mind and memory shall not be held or taken to be good or effectual in law. That indicates the status that was not given to women. However, there is one aspect of the law, ironically, where women were treated relatively equal to men, and that's in criminal law. Luckily, these records can provide a wealth of information. So special cases like divorce, bastardy, immigration, or being the common scold would leave some sort of written testament. So what obstacles do we have and challenges? Many women left no letters, journals, diaries, or recorded oral histories. In some instances because they could not read or write. Women often appeared as numbers in records where others were named. This was common in the census. Maiden names were not listed, which would provide a clue to which family they were members of prior to marriage. Or they died before the vital records were commonplace. So a woman's rights and property were swallowed up in her husband's when she married. So the strategy is to start with the younger generations and work your way back. Unless you're lucky and you had somebody who actually kept files, left Bible records, or some kind of communication, letters, or even property listings, wills that gave more information, in-depth information. So you need to re-examine your traditional genealogical record sources and pay attention to the details. Compile a list of family names and possible nicknames and variations. In this case also, with the names and the variations in spellings, you want to think about nicknames, of course, and not just immediate family names, perhaps in-laws. That can often add to it. And then you follow the adjacent and male relations for clues. Sometimes there are clues in property names because they're named for someone in the family. And that's something to consider as part of the family history. So, what can we do about all this? How can we improve our possibilities? We've talked about names. What are other sources of information? Where should we look? There's lots of places. And some of these are familiar to you, I'm sure. We have both public and private. The usual sources that we're familiar with, like government and church records, cemetery records, directories, newspapers, court records, legal documents, land records, and then of course the private. And this is where we really find the gems. Letters, diaries, journals, family Bibles. But don't forget artifacts, family artifacts. There may be histories associated with that. They can also indicate a variety of information, such as origin of perhaps a tool, how it may have been used, or something that the women may have created or woven might indicate a time frame, or a particular yarn that's used, or material may indicate the origin, or where this was a popular cloth, or what it was used for. And then, of course, oral history that's been passed down from generation to generation. In some cases, phrases, sometimes even recipes, or use of certain vegetables or preparation of meals may indicate a particular region. And then, of course, social organizations. Government, we're familiar with the various items that we've already looked at in many cases and that have been compiled and collected through the years. The census, federal and state. Some states had that, and in some cases, some cities even had certain kinds of population records and listings. Your legislative, naturalization, your passenger arrivals, tax records, land records, vital records, and military pensions. Now we'll focus on some of the categories that are relevant to women in census. Again, this is a lot to absorb, and we'll be more than happy to mail a copy of this presentation to you, which will give you a little more detail. But some of the things to keep in mind, each census has something different, or something that repeats in some instances, and some only unique to that census. So it's important to see what's available in each one. Don't just skip over because you find one item and then you don't find it in the next. Look thoroughly. By the time we get to the 20th century, again, there are changes. For instance, from 1890 to 1910, it indicated the mother of how many children and how many of those children were living. In 1890, most people are familiar with the special veterans schedules, which named the Union veterans. Some Confederates were listed as well, and their widows. And of course, the schedules are available. By 1900, we've got the month and year of birth. So if church records aren't available, that may indicate, give you the information you need to go further. In 1900 and 1910, we've got number of years married. That can provide a clue. In 1930, the age at the first marriage. So all of that indicates some frame of reference. By 1940, we've got a whole lot more with information on, is this person a veteran? Are they the wife, widow, or under 18-year-old child of a veteran? So it gives you a lot more background. Has this woman been married more than once? Yes or no? Age at first marriage. Number of children ever born. This does not include stillbirths. With naturalization, we have a whole other set of information. The current definition of naturalization is the process by which U.S. citizenship is granted to a foreign citizen or national after he or she fulfills the requirements established by Congress in the Immigration and Nationality Act. There's some quirkiness here too, again, in that originally women and children generally did not need to apply for separate citizenship because they derived the citizenship either from their fathers or their spouses. Non-native children became citizens when their father was naturalized. Then between 1855 and 1922, an alien woman became a citizen automatically if she married an American citizen. Relatively few single women became naturalized before 1922, and married women could not be naturalized unless they were widowed or divorced. So women 21 years of age were entitled to citizenship in 1922, and derivative citizenship was discontinued. This changed in later years. I know you can't see this too well, but there is an example of declaration of intention, which gives a great deal of information about the individual seeking citizenship. So it gives places like where they came from, what region it was from, what ship they came on to the United States, where they entered the port, all key information. But keep in mind that frequently when people entered the United States from another country, the area that they sometimes stated was maybe the largest known city or recognized city near their village and was not necessarily their place of origin, but in that region. At least it would give you an area to explore.
FYI, Eva, nobody can hear me. We've got about 20 people watching online,
Okay.
and I'm stepping out.
So what we indicate here in the name is that in some countries, you indicate if it's a male or female by the letters in their last name to indicate that. And here's an example actually of my grandfather and grandmother information on their files indicating the spelling of their name, which in some instances was changed. Now, pensions were not always granted, and that didn't really come into existence until basically after the Revolutionary War. And that's how sometimes we find out about the widow and the rest of the family, by the claim, and they indicate the names of the family members, residents, land may be owned or being petitioned for. We have names of witnesses at a marriage. These could be relatives, these could be neighbors. All those weren't being explored as to the connections. And perhaps the relatives, maybe later relatives, neighbors. Pension verifications will often list members of the family and the wife or widow. So you have land records as well, and these often will note the kinship and or connect the persons to a specific locale at a given time, which then gives you a frame of reference where to go to look for further information. Some relatives may have traveled together, and so some may go on to another place, but perhaps other relatives stayed in that area. And again, you have a clue, and you have additional information, and maybe additional relatives. Land was a popular attraction, and many people went westward as part of that attraction. It was generally recorded, the land ownership, in an area as soon as the settlers began to arrive. And so these records sometimes exist when few other records are available. Interestingly enough, women could own land in certain situations. So don't be surprised to find a woman listed as an owner of land. And that can provide information because not every place had the same systematic method of collecting information. In some, they might have, when they file a claim, they might have to give where they came from, who they were, what work they did. In others, they didn't. And so women who met the criteria for owning land could file claims under the Homestead Act of 1862. So don't give up on relatives, especially women owning land. They knew a good deal when they saw it. This is a local situation in Cambridge, Maryland. Very interesting story of Mary Bramble and the land records and what we were able to find from atlases of all places and maps. In East Newmarket, Dorchester County, and how the names changed, how you can see the owners through the years. And how things traveled, descended down through the family, ownership of land. You find these little snippets of information. Mary King orphan by her guardian, James Twilley, show us that Mary King, deceased, died intestate, and how certain tracts of land went to the different heirs. And notice how many of those were women. Sarah King, Amelia King, Elizabeth King, and Harriet King, daughters and heirs of Henry King and Mary King. So it gives you right there a whole bunch of names and their connections and how they were connected. And it gives you some dates and places and who was appointed a guardian. So this house was traced originally as being at a particular southeast corner of Railroad Avenue and Main Street. Then a deed in 1814 called it the Yellow House lot. Then it moved in 1889 and became a hotel. So all this is documented, probably even more in local history. Newspapers, a nice source of information, especially sort of curiosity tidbits. Mrs. Bramble having a goose that laid 45 eggs this season in 1857. And it talks about the brick hotel, that yellow house. So you can't find the maiden name. For most Americans, women's surname is dropped in favor of the new husband's name when they marry. So know all the names that the woman ever went by: the given name, nickname, pet name, variant spelling, any kind of, there could be even misspellings. And differences in names from census to census, and you're wondering if it's the same person, but if all the other data matches, good possibility. So if the marriage records do not list a maiden name or they're not available, consider these options. Check the obituary for names of male relatives, not just immediate. Also cousins, uncles, in-laws. The husband's death certificate might have information. Military records, deeds. Check for copies of divorce, hospital records, voting records if you can find. And then more advanced, you start looking for neighbors and people living in the household that might be relatives. They may have different names, or they may be, again, in-laws, not necessarily blood relatives, but that can provide a clue too. Children's middle names or even first names could be their mother's maiden names. Cemetery locations, where are they buried? And if their spouse isn't buried with them, perhaps they're with their maternal family. Sometimes that happens. Spouses would be buried in separate cemeteries. So who bought the plots? That might provide clues. We've got friends, associates, and neighbors. All are part of our life. So make a list of things such as friends, societies, associates, business partners, religious groups, sports teams, political teams. Look for the family and local histories. Look at historical societies, libraries in the area. Go to genealogical societies and organizations. Just don't give up. Things to consider: creating timelines that help you focus, interviews and oral histories, scrapbooks, family history. Index your heirlooms. They often provide clues. Generations. Sometimes they can spot things that you don't see. They might ask the one question you didn't think to ask. And that might put you on the path. Timelines. Variety of timelines. What works for you? Oral history. Record information and share. That is so important, to share the information, because somebody may have the piece that you need and you have the piece that they need to complete that record. You can do scrapbooks, modest books, little gifts for special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries. That's a way to preserve information and to share the information. Some people are good at writing, some are good at taking photographs, scan documents, even quotes from relatives. You know, you remember something your grandfather said or your grandmother would do. A favorite recipe of hers, shared with the family. Besides a scrapbook or a photo book, you can also make a gift of memories, kind of thing, recipes. There's a wide range, and these days there's so many sources that you can find for making your scrapbooks. You might use some materials from or certain color schemes that are favored in your family. The stuff, that's what everybody always is interested in, the heirlooms, the stuff that you see. What is this particular thing? You might find a musical instrument that a relative played that you weren't really aware about. So it may not be worth much in money, but it's something that's really worth to know about for your family history. But take pictures of it. And 'cause these days with all these storms and floods and things, try to preserve your heirlooms in some fashion. And worst comes to worst, you'll have the pictures. These are also helpful in interviews to show something and say, do you remember this? Or do you know what this particular blanket was created? Do you know who made it, if it was handmade? Or do you have any particular favorite songs growing up? That could also be helpful in adding to what your relative was like and enjoyed. So remember, no one is better qualified to write your family's history than you are. Also, the sooner the better. We always say, oh, I will do this when I retire. I will do this when. Bring in your younger relatives if they show an interest, or tell them the stories, if nothing else, so that they get a sense of the people that came before them. And what we have inherited from them besides just names, but maybe ideas and an approach to life, and maybe some skills as well. So take the time to preserve the stories, the photographs, the small mementos that mean so much. This is your legacy to future generations, and give it the attention it deserves. Your children and your grandchildren will thank you for it. And of course, you can always come visit the library in person, which we love, as well as contacting us by email or phone, but I recommend email. And we can also, if you wish to make an appointment for assistance with further research and advice, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to work with you. This is the information for contacting us. As I said, you can call, but it's easier to contact us ahead of time by email, and then we can set a time that we can speak more thoroughly and leisurely about your request. So our department, Social Science and History, is available at ssh@prattlibrary.org. That's PRATTLIBRARY.org. If you wish to contact me or any of our staff, that's where you would send the email. We'd be glad to hear from you if you have any questions or comments, or just to come and visit us, and we can share other resources for your research. I thank you very much for listening patiently. I'm sorry I have no way of hearing directly from you today, and hope to see you sometime in the future. Thank you.